I worked with the local health promoters to deliver abate to the campo, which helps to control the mosquito population in the water supply.
I met with members of two communities, El Roble and Palo Grande, to begin the work of outlining the Rotary Foundation grant proposal.
I visited the Zacmel Dos Solar Water Project, reviewing the sustainability of that grant.
I rode in a Salvadoran taxi. It was scary, but exciting.
I met with the El Zapote Community Board after implementation on the sustainability of their water project.
While meeting with the community of El Roble, I made a new friend.
I conducted a needs assessment for a grant for new medical equipment at Suchitoto Hospital.
I worked with Rotarians and a local artist to paint a beautiful mural at Suchitoto Hospital so that the patients and parents could enjoy the beauty of the mural.
I learned that solidarity is more important than charity. I see how hard these people work given the opportunity to improve their community. I witnessed the transition of the Center of Arts for the Peace from a dream to a reality. A place where visual art, music, and dance come alive. I know a very special person, and for those that have not yet met her, I'd like to introduce my very dear friend, a dreamer and a doer, Sister Peggy O'Neill.
Well, I'm wired again, so and I'm thinking of my fiance, Kieran, but I don't know where he is. Where are you, Kieran? There you are, okay. Sit with all the men at the table, please. I don't want you sitting next to sexy women. I was thinking a whole lot about you last night because I did remember what he said about the women putting the wreaths or the crosses on the cemetery, the women from the South going and looking at graves of those people from the North. And I just want to share another little story. And you know how soldiers wear pants with pockets? And tortillas are our staff of life, along with water. And tortillas are so important. You know how you say to a friend, "What did you have for lunch at Rotary so-and-so?" I guess you have to get into the soccer clubs to get a good answer to that question because they seem to have great food. Collecting soccer balls. But, you know, what did you have for lunch there? The question in El Salvador is, con qué? And that literally means with what? With what did you eat your tortilla? You do not have a meal without tortillas, and sometimes meal is only a tortilla. So children will say, con sal, Peggy. Con un poco frijoles, an egg. Sin nada, with nothing. But it's the tortilla, so I have to exaggerate that. Well, when soldiers would come to these little communities, they could only come by air or by water, and so you always knew when they were coming and you could get prepared. The men never went out to work. And they kept the children out of the schools because children tell everything to anybody, that kind of thing. And they didn't want the men who were the leaders in the community to get to be known, you know. And so anyway, when the soldiers left camp, there was a little joy. But I watched these women always loading up the soldiers who were leaving with tortillas. And they kept stuffing their pockets, these kids, soldiers. And I said to my friend Mercedes, but Mercedes, you gave them so many tortillas. And her answer to me was, I hope our boys are receiving tortillas from somebody, from other mothers. Now that's, again, tonight we share our food with each other, and tomorrow we'll share our food with others. So we hunger for the war to end, but we don't forget what those of you who have visited Ghana, Nigeria, so many places, El Salvador, know. Tonight we share food. That's solidarity. So Kieran's story made me remember that last night. I also do want to talk a little bit more about the Centro Arte para la Paz. What we're looking for right now, we always get soccer balls, but we're looking for Kindles. We are not a reading culture. And so if you upgrade, you may want to have one club think about that too, because books are very difficult to ship, and Kindles are magic. The kid goes home with we only have a couple of dozen, but we're starting. And obviously, you have to also introduce teachers to Kindles, because it's not a reading culture even for teachers. And so it's exciting. We're having book clubs, imagine. And the other thing that I really want to tell you is, I need to say, I looked into the eyes of many soldiers, recruited soldiers for the army, and my friends, I never saw the enemy. I saw scared kids. I did look into the eyes of colonels. I did see the enemy, because they took advantage of the poor little scared kids. The United States government was sending $1.5 million a day to El Salvador for 12 years, your tax money. $1.5 million a day. And that was in the 80s. Imagine what that would be now. And, hearing bombs and all kinds of artillery. We even used napalm and left over from Vietnam. And we equipped them with uniforms and boots and rations. They ate fruit cocktail out of cans, these little soldiers. And, the colonels would sell that stuff to the kids. They really took advantage. But I just want you to know that, there are very few enemies. Scared kids and scared people who live very close to them. I guess I stand here only because I have something to hold me. I too had tears looking at Ghana and smiles seeing that you are midwives and mid-husbands, birthing, assisting at the birth of new life for so many. So you are parteras, assisting. It just thrills me, and I too was crying. But I have a theologian friend. His name is Gustavo Gutierrez, and he actually is 10 years older than Peggy, so he's hitting 98. And he's still going strong, and he's now a professor at the University of Notre Dame. He's a Peruvian who had polio as a boy and was in bed for 9 years. And he's still very, very crippled. But he's a biblicist. And he is just amazing with the way he deals with scriptures. And he wrote a book on Job. And there are a couple of lines in that book I would love to share with you, because I think you are spoken about in that book. He says, and again, he plays with the scriptures. And he says, There's a story in the book of Revelations. North Americans don't read the Apocalypse or the book of Revelations because it's all metaphor, and too many of us read it literally. I mean, it talks about demons, etc. But in Latin America, that's a book that's very popular. They just name the demons, so they're not afraid of them. You know, capitalism may be named as a demon. Ronald Reagan once was named as a demon. That was because of the war, okay? So, and you know, then they just talk about these demons metaphorically, you know? So, but anyway, in the book of the Apocalypse, when we pass over, when we die, there's supposed to be an angel waiting for us to wipe away our tears. And Gustavo says in this book, "Woe to you who die dry-eyed. Woe to you who died without feeling the pain of the world." Rotarians don't have to worry. You're going to have an angel waiting for you to wipe away your tears. No? And I also want to tell you about young people at university. I never went to Rochester. I mean, I don't even know what it looks like. My university was in New Rochelle, New York, but that's close. It was correct. In the bulletin, it said Rochester. I don't want you to repeat that because who was that announcer who exaggerated stories? And Brian Williams? I don't want you to, all right? But in New Rochelle, this is what they asked. They would sneak into my office, and, you know, we'd start to talk, chit-chat. And the real reason they came, come on, Peggy, now, do you really believe there's life after death? Yeah, come on, tell me the truth. What do you really think? And I have to say to you that that question has never been posed to me in El Salvador. I have a great relationship with young people now. I'm like the grandmother. I am appropriately the grandmother. But I used to work more with adults. The women's movement, we founded in Suchitoto, and the men getting them seeds, like I mentioned. But I'm working now with youth. I have never had that question asked of me. You know what they ask me when they're awakened? Peggy, why isn't there life for everybody before death? They so believe that God is on their side that they really know that they will be received by angels. Now that's a metaphor, but that is what they believe. But the question is, why isn't there life for everybody before death? So those are the kinds of things that I think you're midwiving and mid-husbanding. You're making sure that little people know that somewhere, somebody really believes there should be life for everybody before death. And that just made me so happy when I saw that on the screen. The smiles that came when the Red Sox came. I don't mean the Red Sox, but those socks that were red, okay? So this center produces young people who have an imagination now. When I went to the refugee center, when I first, it wasn't a center, when I went to live in a refugee camp, I would always invite children, because remember, I was 47 when I arrived. I still had my period, but I was an old lady. I was 47, okay? I know, I began to sweat terribly in El Salvador, but it was okay because we have 6 months wet, 6 months dry, but it's always between 95 and 100. So everybody was sweating, you know, whether you were men or women. So anyway, what was I going to tell you about? Tell me, come on, help me. The children. Oh, and thank you. Where's my? Okay, good. Anyway, in the refugee camp, I would always engage the kids because they would teach me Spanish, and they'd be patient with me. I thought everybody was patient, but you hung out with the kids. And I would invite them to play things. Come on, I'll teach you checkers. No, and they would always say, no, yo no lo puedo. I can't do it. They felt they couldn't do anything. No puedo, and they'd back off. And that, as a teacher, that bothered me. What do you mean you can't do? You always can't do. So in a sense, you see, I wanted to erase that phrase, no puedo, can't. I can't do it. And that's another reason I think this center is so important to all of us there. Children now say, can I do that? Will you give me a chance? It's an opportunity. And I can't tell you when children are longing for opportunity, they become so good at everything so quickly. I mean, you know how much you wanted your children to play instruments. I had a young boy, his name is Angel, who started to play the cello, but he liked better the violin. And it was a young woman from Iowa, Laura Steins, who was a volunteer for a year, was a cellist. And she worked with him only for 3 months. After 3 months, he played a solo in a very swanky hotel in Suchitoto. He was a genius, but he just wanted so badly to learn that violin. And a few months after that, we were in the same hotel with harpists. And Angel looked very sad to me. He was 18. He wasn't a baby. And he was sad, and he performed so well with the harpist and the cellist. And so I called him aside. I said, what's the matter, Angel? Angel, what's the matter? He said, Peggy, I'm leaving for the States next week. He said, I haven't seen my mom and dad for 9 years. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this kid could have been a teacher of violin, and he's going. I wanted him to stay, But he hadn't seen his parents in 9 years. And I said, Angel, I hugged him. And we were in the middle of a nice little hotel patio. So we sat down at our table. And, and I could tell the others looked and could see there was something the matter with Angel. And he said, excuse me. He said, I said, tell the girls what's happening, Angel. They can tell you're upset, these other younger harpists. And he said, I haven't seen my mom and dad in 9 years, and 6 years, and I'm going. I think it was 6. And I said, after he said that, Raquel said Raquel, tell them your story that you have with your parents. She says, I haven't seen my dad in 13 years. I have my mother, though. And there was the other harpist, her father was a terrible alcoholic. I didn't want to ask her to tell her story. It was too painful. But they looked at each other because she had her father, but she didn't have her dad, And, I'll have to tell you, it was a happy ending. It was like the video. He made it to the States, and he had an uncle who was a citizen by now, or had correct papers of some type. And he got a lawyer, and it all worked out, and my Angel is living in Connecticut. He's safe. And he got work. Sorry, he didn't keep studying, but he's working, and he bought himself a violin. And on Facebook, he found his teacher living now not in Iowa, but in San Antonio, Texas, working with hospice patients, helping them die, listening to cello music. That is what she's doing. But she teaches him violin via Skype to Connecticut. Now, isn't that wonderful, no? The other thing is, there's a Canadian, Wendy, who came to Suchitoto because she was on another health project from Canada in Acatao, which is in northern Chalatenango. And on one day off, she visited Suchitoto from that other brigade. And her husband's a physician, and she too was a healthcare worker. But she was a harpist. And she came to the center, and that brigade always leaves something cultural in the community before they leave. And a couple of times it was Wendy and her harp. And she came to the center, and I was in the office, went out to greet them, and she said to me, you know, would you like to have harp classes here? I'd love to come and teach harp. I looked, I said, you gotta be kidding, you have no idea. I mean, harps, how are we gonna get harps? But then she said, I've done this in Peru, and I said, oh, she does know what she's getting into, you know. She came every 12 weeks for about 5 years. She has sickness in her family now, from Canada. She has sickness, cancer, her son, so she doesn't really come that often, but she teaches harp every Sunday by Skype to those who are really good at it now after 5 years, and they are the teachers of the new ones coming up. So there are all kinds of ways of living out of solidaridad, solidarity. Our harps are really, artisanal. They're made by a carpenter in Suchitoto. The only thing that she brings or sends is the soundboard. You know? We have played for our Senate. I have watched senators, men and women, come out of their area where they're sitting, and they'll say, what do you call this instrument again? There was never a harp in El Salvador, no? In Guatemala, there are. So I have adults who have no idea what that. When we started violin, the kids called them baby guitars. You know? Oh, this tiny guitar. You know, that's how it works. We went to a massacre site with a couple of delegations, and I had a student from Ohio, one great music school there, who came with his fiddle. And at the end of the story of the massacre in Copapayo, we always gather around and after the testimony and join hands in prayer. And this young man asked me if he could play the violin. And he played, were you there when they crucified my Lord? Now, no words, of course, but the tone. Everybody was weeping. But the tone of that, again, solidaridad, the music. Everybody can identify with that, the way that violin, he was just wonderful. And he was also generous with his instrument. With the children at night, we slept in the village. And a woman came from the same school, young woman, and she played too. I made her play after what happened to me after he played. It was a couple of years later. So we have people like you who do water projects, befriend horses up in El Roble, no? We have people like you who have come and, water really is the gift of life. I would walk and walk. I was in such good shape during the war, I will say that, because we had no roads. And villages, it would take you, some of them, 6 hours to get to, so you had to stay overnight. But you'd walk and you'd stop along the way, and the phrase was, regálame un poco agua, por favor. Would you gift me with a little water, please? And they'd come with like a gourd filled, and boy, did you, but you knew all it took for them to get that water. And that is why we have all kinds of renal problems. They're all on dialysis. Water was so precious. And working in these hot fields, they never got into the habit of watering themselves. So it is just a terrible, terrible thing right now to watch young men and women die. And of course, it had everything to do with fertilizers leaking into the water sources too. But water, you really have brought us the gift of life. You know the story of the 3 wise men? I think if it was a story of 3 wise women, they would have bought more useful gifts. So I want to thank you. You bring useful gifts. And those soccer balls are so useful. I don't have soccer balls doing all that you have them doing, although I love them when they come. I don't have them doing that in an organized way. It's more instruments and Kindles and the arts. But what you are doing is preventing, I imagine. He said it so well. I forget his name, I'm sorry. You said it so well when you said that, you know, if you don't keep them busy and get rid of the energy, and it just leads to, and then it leads to larger and larger terrorism. And we're in that middle to larger. So we're focusing a lot on prevention. And I hope to write projects where we will do a little bit beyond the prevention. We'll even look for professionals who can help us in small communities do the intervention to get at the bottom of the systemic social problems, alcoholism, real poverty, trauma from war, which has not been dealt with fully yet, if it can ever be fully dealt with, okay? Another story that was a happy story for me. I was on a bus one day during the war, and the bus always stopped a long time at a town called San Martin. And there weren't too many people on the bus. This is a positive story about machoism, I should say. I am forgetting English, but anyway. This is, it shows you that everything has a good side. On the bus, and waited a long time, and finally 2 soldiers got on the bus, and they took off 2 young boys. And one woman got up and jumped off the bus and started screaming, "He is my son!" And she was screaming, running, and this is a big city, so, well, pretty big town. And everything stopped and was watching. So I jumped off the bus and said, "That's my godson. You know, I'm the madrina." You know, and screaming. Well, these 2 soldiers felt so bad that they couldn't publicly, you see, in any way go after the women. So they finally gave us the 2 boys. So they go back on the bus. Well, we were screaming, let me tell you, making a scene. And so we got back on the bus, and that young boy sat next to me, and he had his hand right here, the whole ride in. And he got off the bus now we couldn't talk on the bus much because you didn't know who was on the bus. Remember I talked about trust? So you really couldn't chit-chat. But he just kept like squeezing my leg. And he got off the bus at Ishtagwa, which is about 25-30 minutes before Suchitoto. I looked out at the window at him. He looked up. That face, I never saw him again. But, that the joy of knowing, the joy of your knowing that you have been madrinas, padrinos, godmothers, godfathers. And I do say that that's one of the things about you that I so admire. Your giving is not a transaction. You don't just put something in a jar. What you do is you interact. And my joy, that's why I stay there. I'm selfish, let me tell you. My joy is to see those smiles up, not on screen. I see it. I'm right there. I feel the pain of this broken world, but I see the smiles from a people who have a dogged faith. Dogged. No matter what happens, gracias a Dios, I'm alive to tell the story. Or gracias a Dios, as they bury a child, I had her for X number of years. No? They don't say that out loud. They only say gracias a Dios. Gracias a Dios. And so what a joy to be able to hear that over and over again. I want to dare you to continue to be midwives, no? I want you to know that the angels will be waiting for wet-eyed people to come. And my people, the dogged faith, I like to say, is the incubator of their hope. You know that little baby that you saved? Ghanaian, I remember. And he's now 7 months old. At times, hope is like the 2-month-old baby who's now, because you put that incubator of dogged faith surrounding that hope, that its fragility just seems to strengthen and strengthen. No, it's this hope that God's will be done. No, I just want to say, I'm here to kind of end my time with you, but remember, low-grade herpes, we're together, all right? Here's what I want to say to you at the end, besides thanking Jeannie Knopf. She looked pretty sexy today in her Ghanaian dress, but she has been an angel for me. I didn't have to wait to get tears wiped away. There are many angels. I do want to thank the family I've grown to love because I learned about Rotary, you know, and not only Wayne, but Lisa and David and Kaylee. Did I say it correctly? And Wendy. Not Wendy. Wayne. And what's your name, hon? These new brides, you know, I don't come home often enough or come back here often enough. But the 2 boys that belong to Wayne and Lisa came when they were boys. They're men now. And they're drummers. They ruined a lot of our stools because those are the wooden things that they could show off on. But those marks are in my house. And I love you very much. And I see their character. They cannot not be Rotarians. I mean, that's all there is to it. But I do want to thank, too, Bruce and Sue and the team who did all the other. But Bruce and Stu, you really were working hard here. I thought that, you know, it was going to start in Cleveland, but it really has started right here. And I'm going to leave this morning, which is really tomorrow morning, but I don't know whether I'll go to bed, at 6:30, and Sue has found me a flight that can get me home by 12:30. Because I have a delegation tomorrow coming, and it's a nephew and my grandnephew with their church group, an Anglican, you call it Episcopalian here, church community, and they're bringing Kindles and soccer balls to us too. Here's really what I want to remind you about, and I know you know it. You've never seen a hearse followed by a U-Haul truck. No. What we carry with us are those moments of oneness and our connections. Our connections with all that is alive, all we have birthed and nourished and loved. All of the sharing of food and hunger. Well, I want to, let's remind ourselves that let's continue to anchor ourselves in what is right, what is true, and what is kind. And let's give our one wild and precious life away. And I'm going away, but I carry you with me. And Rotary, because of a donation, I don't know where Paul is, from Calgary, Canada, helped with a grand donation for our last exposition on women in the museum. And that little circle's right there with all the credits. And, you know, it doesn't say too much around the circle. So everybody, you know, says, and who's that? That's Rotary, Canada. Calgary. And now I can say it's where that big fire was. You know, it's a little north. So Rotary comes closer and closer and closer. Even though I'm going farther and farther and farther geographically, I belong to you in a closer and grateful way. So thank you. Let's continue a good day.